I'm Georgiana from ADORNit, and I am here today to talk about all of our cute Stitch Club patterns. This is our frequently asked question segment, or for those of you that are newbies to our Stitch program, this is the video you're going to want to watch to get started. So here we are with all the basics of our fun Stitch Clubs. Okay, so we have 19 plus Stitch Clubs. It grows monthly. We keep adding cute new Stitch Clubs. So we have a ton of fun different programs to be part of. We also have individual patterns. We love hand embroidery. So let's just say that there's so many fun different designs to choose from, and we work with lots of different artists for our hand embroidery. So first things first, you sign up or you order something from us here at ADORNit for hand embroidery, and what happens? Okay, so when you very first sign up for a Stitch Club, our processing time frame is about 2 to 3 weeks. When we're really busy, it's closer to 3 weeks. So sometimes when you're really excited to get a stitch pattern, it can seem like it's forever, but once you go through that process, then it's about every 30 days. So once your card is billed, there is a 2-week processing window, and then we ship out your pattern. Okay, so it's all done with a fulfillment in batches and things like that. So that's why we have those processing windows. So once you get your pattern, it will come in a letter envelope. Unless you buy thread and some other things, then it will come in a package for your first one. But all patterns coming after that come in a letter. So they're all shipped letter rate, okay? So it'll come to you like this. So this is one of our patterns from Sweet Homestead. It's a really cute program by Diana Markham. And it will come just like this in a poly bag. We put them in these poly bags so that they are protected. And then you're gonna open it up, okay? So you'll see you have a color-coded pattern that is printed onto a wash-away stabilizer. So your design will depend on which club you are signed up for, okay? Then all of our clubs also come with a stitch guide, and it's a full color stitch guide. It will have a picture on the front of the completed stitch pattern, and then inside it will come with your stitch guide that shows it up close, and we show which threads are pointing to where, so that you can see and get a good idea of where your colors are. And then over on the other side in the black text is which stitches we use. Okay, we use very basic stitches in all of our patterns. Back stitch could be done on pretty well all of them. Then we throw in the others like a stem stitch and a French knot and a lazy daisy. So we use very basic stitches in all of our stitch programs. Okay, all right, then the other thing that you're going to need is a background fabric, and that is not included in the Stitch Club unless you add on a quilt kit or something like that with your program. So basically you're going to need to have something to stitch onto, and we get asked this all the time: what do I stitch it onto? That is, my friend, totally up to you, because that's the fun thing about hand embroidery is you can embroider on almost anything. So that's why we say it's totally up to you. What we tend to use the most is 100% cotton quilting fabric, because we love sewing our projects into finished items, quilts and pillows and wall hangings and things like that. So we always use 100% cotton quilting fabric. So our ADORNit fabric is what we use, and we usually almost always use a cream or white fabric. But it's so fun to even stitch on colored fabric. So really there's so much you can do. You can see this one is stitched onto our ADORNit. It's called Spray Mist Black. It's a darker fabric. So really you can do whatever you want. This one is also stitched onto a black fabric. Other things you can stitch onto: tea towels. We have so many fun different tea towels that you can stitch onto. We also even have a tea towel stitch club that you can be part of. You can stitch onto like ball caps. You can stitch onto denim jackets. So really, if you can stick your pattern onto it, you can stitch onto it, and you can get your needle through it. That's what's so fun about it. So we've seen lots of fun different hand embroidery things that you can stitch onto, okay? If you're going to be sewing it into a project, I do recommend that you pre-wash your fabric. I had a cute gal that was having some problems with her hand embroidery, and I said, why don't you try pre-washing your fabric? And she just got back to me yesterday and said that totally worked. I didn't have the puckering and things like that, because where it is a cotton fabric, I recommend that you pre-wash your fabric. It will just make the end result a little bit better. Okay, so you will need for sure something to stitch onto. Some people get confused and think that you just stitch directly onto this piece of paper, and you don't want to do that. You definitely need to have something to stitch it onto. Okay. The next thing is, in our instructions, it says that you need to iron your fabric. So whatever you are stitching onto, you want it to be a smooth surface, okay? So by what we mean by that is, can you see how this cotton fabric is wrinkly? You don't want to stitch directly onto a wrinkled fabric, okay? Because if you were to do that, and then when you soak your pattern, your stitches might not be nice and pristine because the fabric you stitched onto was wrinkly. So that is definitely something you're going to want to do. And that is in our very first step, that you want to iron your background fabric smooth. Okay. So if you're doing a denim jacket or something like that, just make sure you don't have any creases on it when you're doing that. Okay. So I don't have my iron plugged in, so we're going to pretend that this is smooth fabric. Okay. So remember, iron it. Okay. So the next step is your stitch pattern. Now, all of our ADORNit patterns for hand embroidery are all printed onto our wash away stabilizer. We love this stuff. It is so cool because you don't have to trace your pattern. It saves you a lot of time. So this is also a very frequently asked question, is how do I apply this to what I'm stitching on? Okay, so very simple and easy to remember. You're going to peel, you're going to stick, and you're going to stitch. Okay, so what you're going to do is you are going to peel this pattern, and you can see this is a paper backing and this is the stabilizer. So you're going to peel that off. This paper becomes garbage, and this right here is your pattern. Okay, so now we're going to apply this pattern to your background fabric. So remember, it's going to be iron smooth. You're going to place that onto your fabric, and then all you have to do is smooth it down. So that's what's cool about this pattern, is that you just peel and stick. Okay, you do not iron. So that's another question that we get asked a lot, is do I have to iron it? Don't iron it. If you have hot heat on this, your pattern's going to shrivel up and you won't be happy. You'll have to get a new one. So make sure you do not iron. You're just going to peel, stick, and stitch. Okay. Another question we get asked a lot is, what size do I cut my background fabric? So if you are making it into one of our quilt patterns, we tell you what size that you need to put it onto. If you're just kind of doing your own thing, I really recommend that you know what the end result of what you're making. So if you're going to put it into a wall hanging, I would really suggest that you know what size you're going to have that wall hanging, so that you can stitch it onto the correct size. If you're just doing it to frame it into a cute picture frame like this one we have here, I would recommend 1 inch to 2 inches around your pattern for your fabric, so that you have extra there, that you will have room to put it into a hoop or a frame or something like that. So really, once again, that is totally up to you, and what your end result is what size of background fabric. Typically, anytime we're doing quilt blocks and things like that, we're cutting it and putting it onto a 12 by 12 piece of fabric. Okay. All right. So we've got those details. All right. So that is how you're going to apply your pattern. So next up, we are going to talk about how to start stitching your pattern. I highly suggest that you put it into a hoop. You're going to for sure want an embroidery hoop. Some people don't, that's your preference, but I recommend you put it into a hoop. Another thing that some people will do is they will add a basting stitch around the perimeter of their pattern. That's not something I do, but if that's your preference, then add a basting stitch around your pattern. Okay, so there's lots of great hoops on the market. We tend to use this tension hoop, which some people love, and this is a regular hoop that is very common. A lot of times you'll see them in the store. They're wood. So these are our favorite hoops that we have available for sale. So this one's a tension one. So you actually pinch these two together, and then you have your two pieces of your hoop. So all hoops have a bottom part and a top part to their hoops, okay? So this is the tension hoop. So this is the top part. You place it where you're going to start stitching, and then on the back side, you pinch the tension and insert it into the little grooves that are on the hoop there, and that will tighten it, okay? Then what you're going to do, so that now I have my hoop placed there. For this type of hoop, it is a traditional hoop where you have the screw at the top, and so you loosen it, and then you place your bottom hoop down on your work surface. You place your pattern on top, then you take your top hoop and put it on top, and then tighten it on there. So I need to loosen it a little bit more here, and then you place that on top of there. That is how you put in a hoop, and then you're gonna tighten it. You want your fabric tight in your hoop, but you don't want it too tight. So you're just gonna wanna make sure, because if you place it too tight, it's gonna stretch your threads. So you don't wanna like really yank on it and stretch the fibers of your background fabric, okay? So you want it tight enough that it's tight in your hoop, but not so tight that it stretches your cotton fibers of your background fabric, okay? So basically, if you can kind of like hear the sound, like kind of like a drum, you kind of know that it's tight enough. So that's kind of how I kind of go by it. You just kind of get the feel of it as you become a embroidery expert, right? So as you keep going, practice makes perfect, and that's how you're gonna put it in your hoop. If you're stitching along and your fabric keeps coming loose, you probably need to tighten it a little bit more. So like I said, it's one of those things that you're just gonna practice and get the hang of it. All right, next is needles. This is our #1 frequently asked question that we get asked a lot, and that is, this is hard to stitch through, or my hand really hurts. What's wrong? Why is this embroidery stuff so hard to stitch through? It's your needles. This stuff should be so easy to stitch through. So you are going to want to make sure that you are using a sharp embroidery needle. We have them from ADORNit, and let me find them. Right here. Got it. So we have ADORNit needles that are really sharp, nice ADORNit needles. But there's so many fantastic needles out on the market, okay? So just make sure that you're buying a sharp embroidery needle. There are so many different needles out on the market. I ran to the store and grabbed some. So I just want to kind of show you the difference. So this says embroidery needles, right? But you can see it doesn't say sharp. And I want to show you the difference. This is our ADORNit needle. This is a number 6 crewel embroidery needle. So see the size on that one. And then if you compare it to these other embroidery needles, see how those are much more blunt. Let me even pull this out. They're more of a blunt tip. So they're going to be a lot harder to stitch through this fabric. So see how thick that needle is compared to our sharp embroidery needle. So it's so important that you are using a sharp embroidery needle. Tulip has some, Dritz has some, Bowen has some. There's so many good embroidery needles out on the market. Those are just some names that quick came to my head. So just make sure you're getting a sharp embroidery needle. There is a major difference. And when you put your thread through our stabilizer, it should glide right through. You should not be yanking or pulling or any of that, because it will glide right through if you're using a sharp embroidery needle, okay? The other thing is, if it starts to get a little sticky or tacky, it's probably time to change your needle. You should be able to stitch quite a few of these before you have to change a needle. Some people say every 2 patterns. Gosh, I've gone a lot more patterns than that. So really, that is your kind of preference of how long you go before you need to get a new needle. If it's sticky, you could get some rubbing alcohol and clean your needle. Another great tip is to get some, they have special beeswax blocks that are for needles that you can put your needles into that will help clean your needles. So you can get stuff like that to help with your needles. But really, if you're having a hard time getting your needle to go through our stabilizer, it's not sharp enough. So that is number one probably asked question that we get is about the needles. Another thing is I really like using a thimble. So as I'm going and stitching a lot, it is natural for you to have sore fingers if you're doing a lot of stitching. So I always use a thimble on my hand. I use a leather thimble that we sell at ADORNit. And that just helps keep your fingers so that they're not sore. But that is very common when you're stitching to have a little bit of a sore finger. So use a thimble. That will really help. Okay, so then another question we get asked a lot is what kind of thread to use. So you want to use a cotton embroidery floss for your embroidery. There's so many fabulous threads out on the market. It's hard to choose which kind of thread to use. DMC, of course, is a classic that has been around for ages. But what we have chosen to use is a fantastic family-owned company called Sulky Embroidery Floss. They have so many wonderful products and they are a joy to work with. So that is who we use for all of our embroidery patterns. And we sell thread kits so that you can get your embroidery floss through us to match the kit club that you are part of. If you want to use your own floss, that is totally fine. It's going to work in our patterns. So you don't have to use Sulky Embroidery Floss. You can use whatever brand of embroidery floss you want. So that is totally up to you. You don't have to use the Sulky brand. Our Sulky brand does come on a spool, so it makes it really, really easy to pull off the amount that you need and start stitching. So that's why we love Sulky, is because it's a really nice high quality and really, really easy to use. Okay, so I'm going to thread this needle, and if you want some tips and tricks on how to thread your needle, how to do certain embroidery stitches, we're going to be having all those added onto our YouTube channel. So you can just go to that section here on our YouTube and watch how to do all those basic things that we're going to have, like threading your needle. Okay, so I want to just quick show you how simple and easy this is to go through the stabilizer. So you can see here, here's my pattern. I have it on my fabric. Here's my needle, and can you hear that? It glides right through. So you should not have any problem getting your needle to go through. See, it glides. I'm not pulling or any of that. It will go through and glide. So make sure you have a nice sharp needle. Okay. The other thing with our embroidery patterns is make sure that you are coming up and down through your stitch holes to keep nice, even stitches as you're going, so that when you rinse it, that you don't have skipped threads and things like that. You won't be happy with the outcome. So make sure that you are doing nice embroidery stitches. For more of that, watch our back stitch embroidery video, because I'm going to cover what I mean by that. But you're going to want to make sure you're taking it slow if you're very new to embroidery. And sometimes where this is color coded, sometimes you'll think you get all your lines and you might skip a little bit. So it's really important that you make sure you're doing those stitches nice, so that when you rinse it, you're really happy with the outcome. Okay. All right. So once you have it all stitched, then what's cool about our stuff is that it dissolves. So that's why you don't have to trace, is because you just peel and stick and stitch your product, your pattern onto your fabric. So I am going to show you, normally I do this at home under my kitchen faucet, and we have all these instructions on our instructions that come in your kit. But I'm going to show you, this is just a smaller pattern. And so I'm going to put it into a bucket of water, and it is kind of cold water, so we're hoping it dissolves. So I'm peeling and sticking this cute little pattern, right? Okay, so you're going to pretend like that is all stitched, okay? So then what you're going to do is you're going to run it under your tap water, and I use a lukewarm water when I do mine. Some people set the color with a vinegar, like rinse it with vinegar first. You can totally do that. But I rinse it under my faucet. So we're just going to put ours in this bucket so I can show you. But what's so cool about it is the pattern will automatically start to dissolve. So when this is warmer water, it will immediately just kind of start budding off. But we're just going to kind of let that sit there for a minute. And we'll come back to it. Okay. So, but that's what's cool about our pattern, is that it immediately will start to dissolve when you put it into that lukewarm water. It's like magic. It's the coolest stuff. Some tips I have for that is you can also let it kind of sit. If you want to do it this way, you can let it sit in your water and then put a color catcher sheet on there. Those color catcher sheets are so cool because they will catch any excess dye. Anytime that you are rinsing a garment or a fabric or a thread, it's very normal to have some thread bleed, right? And so those color catcher sheets will grab any of that extra thread. So that's why it's important that you do rinse your fabric and allow it to have the movement of the water to get any of that excess thread bleed out. So as long as you are putting it in water and letting it really kind of soak, I'll let it, and I'll kind of rub it together. I'll take my pattern under my water and I'll kind of rub it together very gently to help lift any of the pattern off. We have some great tutorials on how to rinse your pattern. I have filmed that you can find on our YouTube channel to show you how to rinse those. So when you get to that point, you can come back to our YouTube channel and check that. But let's show them. I got the bucket here. So I didn't obviously stitch this on, so it's kind of harder to see. But can you see how this pattern starts to dissolve? So this will not gum up your washer. It will not gum up your sink. It will not gum up or hurt anything. It will completely dissolve away. It's so cool. So then when you take it out of the water, all that's left is your beautiful hand embroidery stitching. It's really important that once you take it out of the water, that then you lay it onto like I use a kitchen towel or a bathroom towel, something that's very absorbent, and I roll it up into that towel, and then I gently squeeze the excess water out of my pattern. And then I immediately take mine and put it onto my wool mat and iron the backside. So once again, I have all this process of how to do that on our YouTube channel, so you can check out all those videos of how to finish out your embroidery pattern, okay? If you have the other reason why it's important that you dry your towel with that process is because if you just take your pattern right out of your water and you leave it sitting on your table, then you're taking wet thread and you're letting it sit on wet fabric, and you are much more likely to have your thread leach out onto that fabric and bleed onto that background fabric. So it's very important that you take care of that process and don't let that wet thread sit on the wet fabric for a long time. You want to immediately try and take care of that and get your background fabric dry, okay? So I think that is kind of the basics of our frequently asked questions and how to get started. We love using the wool mat and an iron to iron our embroidery products. The wool mat is a natural fiber that allows you to put, so you're going to put your front side face down onto your wool mat, and the wool mat allows those stitches, it's so cool, to kind of just sit in that wool. And when you're ironing from the back side, it's cool because it doesn't stretch or manipulate your stitches. It just like sits there, and we just have them press out so much more beautiful when you use your wool mat. And then we also have our cool mister bottle. So this is like our favorite when we're using our hand embroidery. And we made these wool mats this size so that they fit our hand embroidery perfectly. So this is like a must-have for us, okay? All right. Are there any other? Okay, cool. All right, that is how we go from step A of getting your pattern in the mail to finishing it out and having a beautiful project to enjoy. So then once it's dry, then you can trim it down and put it to whatever you want. Pillows, wall hangings, put it in a frame, put it into a quilt, put it into a table runner. The possibilities are endless. So if you're putting it onto a jean jacket or onto a hat, all you have to do is be able to rinse those and let them dry, and you are just going to absolutely love the end result. So thank you for using ADORNit products, our ADORNit embroidery products. We're so grateful, and I hope that you enjoy it. So happy stitching. I want to personally invite you to come over to Facebook to be part of our Stitch It with ADORNit Facebook group, which is completely free. It is such a fun group to be part of, where we have like over 5,000 women that are part of our Stitch community that are there to inspire and help and give tips. It is so much fun. So we really, really, really want you to come over there to our Facebook group to be part of it, to be inspired daily. So again, that is Stitch It with ADORNit. Come join.